Hello, and welcome to the podcast. My name's James, and today we're going to talk about fire again. So I've been thinking over the last day or two, just about the topics for the podcast in general, but I had some ideas, some thoughts in regards to the fire signs and kind of another way to look at it that I wanted to go over that I wish I had put in the previous podcast. So I wanted to look at that today or discuss that today. So as we talked about, the fire signs kind of represent energy, right? It's the oomph, the vigor, the juice that really kind of gets us, propels us out into the world. That's what the fire signs represent. And as a result of that, they're one, about our own personal sense of kind of action. And number two, they're very vibrant and very honest in the sense that we see them for what they are. So, if we look at a chart of any fire sign, right? Sagittarius, Aries, Leo, doesn't matter, any of the fire signs, we're going to notice some patterns that they all have. And that's because the way the zodiac is composed, right? The zodiac always follows the same pattern. You have cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable as far as the modalities. And then for the elements, you always have fire, earth, air, water, back to fire. And it just repeats. And so there's certain things that kind of happen as a result of that. Number one, the trine houses, which is going to be the houses that are 120 degrees from the first. That is, or really a trine is 120 degrees. And so if you look at a chart, 120, 120, 120, you get a triangle. And so it forms a very nice triangle, is what you kind of get. And so the elements, any element will always be trine to the other elements. And so the trine houses from the first, which is the house of self, are going to be the fifth house and the ninth house. Now, the fifth house represents our self-expressions, our passions, our joys, our pleasures. It's the things we enjoy doing, the things we get really passionate about. It's also our sense of creative expression. That's both physical creativity, so it could be things like children, right? Because we physically create those. It could be our artistic creations, right? Things we make with our hands, with our minds, possibly mental creativity. Intellectual creativity. It could also be spiritual or emotional creativity, relational creativity. So it's all the ways that we outlet our creative self. And it's the things, like I said, we're passionate about, things that really kind of we have a strong feeling towards, as well as it can be kind of the romantic side of things, and then also things we enjoy, right? Things we find pleasurable. Why? Because the fifth house is the house, it's the joy of Venus. So it takes a very Venusian quality to it, right? It has a lot of resonance with the planet Venus. The ninth house represents our belief systems. I always kind of, as like a very, brief summation, call it the house of our worldview, because it's the things, it's the house of where we learn things that expand our horizons, expand who we are as a person. So it's going to be obviously like college, studies of things that are less about practical skill, but more about knowledge and wisdom. And it deals with things that kind of push us beyond our current limits of ourself. Religion, traveling, things of that nature. When we think of, when we meet somebody, when we connect with somebody, when we kind of find people that we associate with and want to associate with, it's very easy to associate with people when they share similar things that they enjoy, right? Which would be kind of a fifth house connection. It's very easy flowing. Or similar belief systems, right? So that, again, similar belief systems, easy connection, right? There's not going to be any kind of fights over core things, or anything like that. If you have the same beliefs, and then obviously if you have the same passions, same sense of, enjoyments, it's very easy to get along with somebody. And so in that way, the 5th and 9th house kind of operate as this very easy way to see somebody. It's a very core piece of who we are. In a lot of ways, they kind of really set us up in terms of our other capabilities and ultimately kind of how we operate through life, which is why they are trine to the first, because they're very resonant with what the first house represents, which is, again, the house of self. So using that understanding of those houses, then what happens when you have elements all in the same sign? It means the signs of the same element have a lot of easy resonance. And it's because they're operating on the same wavelength. Now, the fire signs in specific all have Leo in one of those 3 houses. Why is that important? Well, Leo, wherever Leo is in a chart, will show you how that particular rising sign tends to want to self-express. How does it express itself as a sign? Obviously, I said that 5th house kind of represents creative expression. And so if you have Leo in the 5th, there's obviously a very resonant thing going on there. But it's more about kind of an identity almost expression, sense of expression, right? Who I am. This is the piece about me I really want to show off to the world, because it's ruled by the sun. Well, having Leo in a place that is in natural harmony with the first house means it's very easy to show off who we are. It's very obvious. Again, that goes back to that nature of fire of it's very easy to see what they are. There's no hiding it. It's very obvious. And this is why they have Leo in a house that's resonant to the first. Additionally, there's a natural kind of energy that's going to want to go along with those aspects of themselves, right? Because the fire signs tend to want to act. They want to do and be and exist and live and have some sense of vibrance. And so the fire signs naturally bring a lot of emphasis to learning, growing, creativity. They naturally have a lot of creative potential because of this. In the case of, and I want to give an example of this idea of Leo for a second. So if we think of Leo in the 9th house, what would that mean? That's a Sagittarius rising, has Leo in the 9th house. What do we know about Sagittarius? It always loves to tell people what it thinks about things. When it learns big ideas, what does it want to do? It wants to tell people. It wants to share it. It wants to push those views. Why? Because, again, the way that Sagittarius tends to self-express is through what? Through the 9th house. That's where it draws a lot of its sense of self from. And so that's an example of that dynamic. Obviously for Aries, it's in the 5th house, so it's creative potential. And then for Leo, or rather for Aries, another thing would be in terms of fun and adventure, right? That's why Aries really is kind of like a big kid in a lot of ways. But then for Leo, it's in the 1st. This is why Leo always wants to be seen in any situation. It wants to show off. It wants people to notice it. Because the house of me is the part that they're trying to show off. And it can be in a very physical sense as well. The next thing, if we look at the next set of houses, right, one down from the first, right, you get the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th. Those houses deal with acquiring and working within the physical world. Why? The 2nd house deals with our support systems. It deals with our possessions, the things that we earn and gain as a sense of trying to support ourselves. It's the house that lifts up the 1st. The 6th house is how we work in the world, how we serve others in the world, how we act as a servant or in some kind of servitude. It's how we handle conflict and obstacles. And then the 10th house deals with our public image in society. It deals with our career, right? It's what we're doing in a, vocational sense, how the world kind of sees us. So there's a lot of kind of, I don't want to say material gain, but reputation, right? Wealth, things that kind of stuff that really comes from those houses. So what then does that say about the fire signs? Well, all of the fire signs have those houses in the earth signs. And there's a natural flow that kind of goes on here. The fire signs are about going out into the world. And what is the natural result of having this sense of energy that needs to project out into the world? You interact with the physical world. That's the natural result of that. And so what do you see? The houses that deal with the things of kind of being in the world, they naturally are earth signs then. That means there's a practicality that the fire signs have to them in the nature in which they interact with the world. They just gain a lot of material wealth. If you go out into the world, what happens? You acquire things. If I go out and work, I'm going to acquire money. If I go out and, do things, I'm naturally going to have a physical interaction with it, right? It's the natural result of just acting. You interact with things. And so there's a very tangible quality to the way fire signs kind of that comes as a result of what the fire signs do. If I am naturally educating myself, learning new things, acquiring new knowledge, new wisdom, what's the natural outflow of that, right? A career, right? You gain something from it. And the gain that the fire signs tend to get through their natural mode of existence of just projecting out into the world is they gain physical things. So they have a very practical way of going about and handling, in a very material way, I should say, material, practical way of handling those areas of life. I want to skip the next set for a moment. We'll come back to the air signs. But the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th house deal with our inner world, our psychology, right? The 4th house deals with our private life. That is kind of our internal mindset. It's the way we kind of respond sort of emotionally, although that's also a very lunar thing that we'd want to look at. But it's our internal world, the 4th house, right? At least on a kind of a mental level. But it's a conscious thing. It's I'm kind of in my mind thinking kind of a thing. The 8th house deals with our psychology in a very, when we have psychological things going on. So there's an element of, it's the things we repress. It's the area of, it's the part of the chart where how we handle crisis on a very emotional or mental kind of a level. Like I said, it's psychological issues, psychological tics, and things of that nature. Oftentimes, as I said, it's where we tend to repress things. And then the 12th house deals with our subconscious mind. If the 4th house tends to be more of our conscious impulses, our conscious responses, kind of our internal thinking mindset, the 12th house is a subconscious mindset. It's a part of us that's we can't really put a finger on it. We really have to dive into it to figure it out. And so what do you have for the fire signs? They all have those signs and water signs. What does that mean? It means there's an emotional and an intuitive connection to their psychological processes, right? This is part of why the fire signs kind of naturally just exist the way they are, because all of the houses are very in tune with the elements that really most strongly kind of resonate with them. I know in Vedic astrology, they call those different houses by those elements, right? They call the 1st, the 5th, and the 9th the fire houses. They call the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th the water houses. Or at least I'm like 99% sure. I might be slightly off, but I'm very confident that that's what they call it. And so for the fire signs then, what is the thing going on? They have an emotional connection, an emotional impulse, right? Subconscious, conscious, right? In times of crisis, in terms of what is driving them. Because the 4th house, as well as the 4th, 8th, and 12th are kind of the mental processes that really kind of drive us, right? It's the background stuff that's really kind of going on that's pushing us forward as that first, fifth, and ninth. And so for the fire houses, they all have this in the water signs, which means it's an emotional connection. It's an emotional response. It's an intuitive response. This is why the fire signs have a very good instincts, right? Because they have that easy connection to those things. This is also why Aries is particularly impulsive, right? It has this innate sense of, I have an emotional need, so the natural reaction is just reach out and grab it in an instant, right? It doesn't hesitate because it's instantly connected to that thing. Lastly, the final set of houses, the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th. It's the air signs. These houses deal with kind of the social houses, right? The 3rd house deals with our local surroundings. It's the things around us. It's also going to deal with practical skills. 7th house deals with other people. It's the way we connect and relate on a very personal level to someone else. I would also theorize that it does indeed show how we interact with, I don't want to say objects, but if we have an emotional attachment to something, right, you kind of see this in this house as well. It's the way we interact with something on a very personal basis. Then the 11th house deals with our friends, our community, our followers, and kind of society at large in terms of how we interact with it. And so the fire signs, by their very nature, have a very airy quality to the way they interact with the world. Why? Because their nature is to just go out and be in the world. And if you're naturally out and in the world in a way that's obvious, people notice you. It's very easy to see a fire sign. Fire signs are natural leaders because they have this, I'm just going to go do kind of mindset. And when you have an attitude of do, it's very easy for other people to notice and to want to follow. So the fire signs by their nature have a natural ability to generate and be around people. They naturally tend to acquire a lot of followers, a lot of friends, because they're social in nature by the mere fact that they just kind of get out into the world. That's how they operate. They just move outward into the world. And so they generate a lot of social connections, whether for good or for bad. But that's how they operate. So all that to say, the fire signs have a very resonant chart in relation to the house system, right? It's very easy connection for them, but it's very complementary. And so that's kind of how I wanted to look at it. I think going forward, I'm going to, if it ends up making the podcast too long, I may split each of the other elements into 2 episodes like with the fire signs, but I am going to look at that for each of the different elements going forward because I think it's just an additional way we can look at it and really get a sense for how things operate. I think one other thing is this idea of moving, and this is kind of an addendum just because it's been on my mind. But if we think of the natural progression from fire to earth to air to water, what's going on there? Well, as I mentioned with the fire signs, they project out into the world. They're naturally out there doing. And when you do, you deal with the physical reality, right? You get things. Whether it's money, whether it's experience, whatever it is, right? Practical skills, whatever. The earth signs then. So the fire signs go out and they acquire the earth signs. The earth signs do what they are practical. They're pragmatic. They have possessions. And the natural thing when you have stuff is to share, right? To exchange, to trade, possibly to comfort. And when you're practical, you begin to make logical conclusions from things, right? If I have practical experience, if I do something enough, and I realize, hey, the best way to do something is X, Y, Z, as opposed to A, B, C, you can begin to kind of learn and understand how things work on a more logical level. beyond just the practical skill set, right? And so the earth signs naturally then gain a sense of intelligence because they're so practical, because they apply these practical skills. In addition, when you have things and you exchange them, right? If I have a lot of something and I want something else, what's the natural thing you do? You exchange it. Or in modern society, right? You sell the thing you have a lot of, use the money, and buy something you want. That's the natural dynamic. But that process requires what? Dealing with other people, socializing, right? Communicating. And so the natural flow then for the earth signs is having this sense of practicality, having these possessions and dealing in the physical world, the natural result to socialize, to acquire intelligence. And so they gain the air signs. They progress into the air signs as a natural result of what they're doing. Now, the air signs are intellectual. They are, they're thinking oriented, right? They're logical, they're rational. They're also about communicating, socializing, right? And what happens when you socialize? You talk to somebody, right? You think about things with them. You plan things. Well, you form bonds, right? You form connections. That's the natural flow. The more you talk to somebody, the more you connect with them. On the thinking and rational level, what happens is when you begin to think things through, you begin to get an intuitive understanding of things, right? You begin to see the patterns. You make connections in a more intellectual or mental level. Additionally, you can also have emotional responses to things. You talk to somebody and somebody says something and wow, brings up an emotion, right? You can have a response in some way. And so the air signs then naturally culminate and lead into the water signs, the emotional responses, the connections that things have, because the water signs are about connecting in a lot of ways. And then obviously the water signs, if you have a lot of emotional response to things, a connection to things, what's the natural reaction? You want to act on it. I have this response, right? I have this feeling. I want to act on the feeling, right? And that leads into what? The fire signs again. And so that's kind of the natural flow. I mean, as I said, we see that kind of play out through the chart, at least through the fire signs this time around. As I said, I'm not going to go through this whole process, I think, of explaining what I said. I'll just look at it for each of the signs going forward. But I did want to add that since I didn't talk about it last time, even though it kind of was on my mind. But yeah, so now for sure, the next episode, we will look at the air signs and kind of go from there. All right. Thanks for listening.